Hey guys, tonight we're pulling an all-nighter on the graveyard shift. The humidity is thick enough to chew on, and the fog is creeping in from the lake, laying a heavy, wet blanket over the French Quarter and bleeding into the 8th District. The streets are slick black asphalt reflecting the smear of neon and the slow, erratic pulse of my squad car's dash lights. Listen close. That low, persistent crackle you hear? That's the radio static, my only companion until dawn, and sometimes the only warning I get that something is fundamentally wrong with the city tonight. It's the sound of the Mississippi breathing. It's the sound of the drowned trying to talk. You probably won't make it to dawn after this one. I push the heavy plastic dispatch microphone away slightly. The air in the car is cool, thanks to the struggling AC, but the air outside feels ancient, oppressive, and wet. Tonight is about the water. Tonight, we're dealing with the deep rules. New Orleans has always been defined by what the water gives up, and, more terrifyingly, what it keeps. I've worked homicide in this city for 15 years, seen things that make the average true crime documentary look like a puppet show, but nothing chills me like a 10 to 54 call that originates near the water line, especially when the body is fresh. Because we have rules about the drowned here, rules that aren't in the NOPD manual, rules passed down in whispers from patrol veterans whose eyes saw too much swamp before retirement. Rule 0, the first thing every rookie learns after they see their first floater pulled from a drainage canal, is this: you never, under any circumstances, log the exact point of recovery if it's within 50 feet of a natural waterway. You approximate. You lie. You move the pin on the digital map inland, even if it puts the body in the middle of a dry street. Why? Because documentation is possession, and the river does not like to be audited. If you document the precise location, you give the river the map to follow, and the river always comes back for what's theirs. I'm cruising slowly down Esplanade Avenue, the live oaks dripping condensation like tired old men weeping. The call hasn't dropped yet, but the air has that thick, charged quality, the pre-storm atmosphere, even though the radar is clear. The radio, always humming with the mundane chatter of domestic disputes and joyriding teenagers, has been unnervingly silent for the last 20 minutes, save for that low, resonant static that feels like a heartbeat underwater. The rules about the drowned are predicated on the idea that the soul doesn't immediately leave the body when the water claims it. It gets imprinted by the environment. If they die in fire, they burn out quickly. If they die in air, they just rest. But the water is a conductor. It pulls, retains, and remembers. It doesn't just kill, it incorporates. That's why we treat them differently. We don't just file the case. We manage a spiritual liability. I think some crimes were never meant to be solved. Some deaths were never meant to be filed. They are meant to be acknowledged quietly and released back to the mist, unburdened by human law and administrative paperwork. The most famous breach of Rule 0 happened back in the late 70s, down in the 8th. Patrolman Jenkins. Textbook floater pulled from the bayou where the cypress trees meet the highway overpass. Jenkins was a stickler for procedure. He logged the coordinates precisely, down to the second, noting the mud type and the compass bearing of the nearest alligator nest. The case closed quickly, accidental drowning. But 3 nights later, every single file in the precinct that related to water, to shipping, to the river or the lake was saturated. Not wet, saturated. Like they'd been soaking in the Gulf for a decade. The ink ran. The paper dissolved. And Jenkins? He disappeared. They found his squad car perfectly dry, parked by the river, keys in the ignition. But every single plastic and leather surface inside the vehicle was slick with marsh water. We never found the man, but the precinct smells of deep mud and cypress rot every time the fog rolls in thick like this. Jenkins had tried to take possession, and the river reclaimed him. My internal clock ticks past 2 o'clock. The radio finally breaks the silence, not with a siren, but with a choked, professional voice, thick with humidity and fatigue. Unit 401 dispatch. We have a 10 to 54, deceased person, code 5. Location vicinity of the drainage pumping station, out by the 17th Street Canal. Priority 2. Confirming Unit 401 is responding. The pumping station. That place is a concrete heart struggling to keep the city alive by constantly pushing the water back. It's where the human engineering meets the geological inevitability. It's the worst place to find anything. I key the mic. 401 confirming response. ETA 15 mics. The moment the words leave my mouth, the static buzzes, loud and sharp, a static that doesn't sound like interference, but like speech failing to form. I check the rearview mirror instinctively. The streets are empty. The fog is getting heavier, folding the world in on itself. I put the car in drive, the engine humming low and anxious. Before leaving the relative safety of the main artery, I mentally review the rules again. Approximate the location. Check for the watch. Rule 1. The watch must never stop ticking. Check the temperature. Rule 2. If the body is impossibly warm, it is not just a body. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. The fear is mounting, a cold sweat beneath my vest. I glance at the time display on the dash, 2:07. Comment your location and what time it is where you are. Let me know if you're pulling this shift with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe crack open a window for that midnight fog, and let's hit the streets together. We're heading toward the water, and the rules are about to be tested. The drive out to the 17th Street Canal pumping station is a descent. The city lights fade fast, swallowed by the increasing density of the fog and the growing scale of the concrete infrastructure designed to manage the water that perpetually threatens to reclaim the land. I pass under immense, rusted iron bridges and along canals that are choked with green growth. The smell is profound now, a mix of stagnant water, decaying marsh gas, and the industrial odor of ozone and wet metal from the pumping facility itself. I pull off the highway onto a service road that runs parallel to the colossal concrete flood wall. The road is barely paved, scarred by years of water damage and heavy equipment. My headlights are weak against the fog, creating a tight, blinding cocoon of white around the car. The radio static persists, no longer a random crackle, but a rhythmic hiss, like steam escaping a pressurized pipe, or maybe like breath being slowly expelled under deep pressure. The pumping station looms ahead, a brutalist fortress of gray concrete, lit by a single, yellow sodium lamp that flickers relentlessly. It's a 24-hour operation, but it feels abandoned. The massive pipes and turbines are silent tonight, or perhaps the fog is just muffling their operation. I slow the patrol car to a crawl. The scene has been secured by a single patrol officer, a young guy named Du Bois, whose car is parked diagonally, haphazardly, suggesting panic or haste. I step out into the humid air. The moment my boots hit the ground, I feel the damp chill rise up through the soles, a cold that has nothing to do with the outside temperature. The air is so thick I feel like I'm breathing water vapor. I pull my flashlight. Du Bois emerges from the shadow of the pumping station's exterior wall, looking pale and green under the yellow light. He's standing near the access gate for the main sluice canal. 401. He greets me, his voice tight. Glad you're here. Nobody else is responding tonight. This is a P2, Du Bois. Where's the supervisor? I ask, my calm investigator voice automatically kicking in. They're dealing with something else closer to the quarter, Sarge. This felt different. I didn't want to wait. He gestures toward the canal. We're standing on the maintenance apron, about 10 feet above the water line. The water itself is sluggish, black, and looks thicker than usual, almost oily. What did you find? She's caught on the grating for the intake valve, about 15 feet down. She must have floated in from the lake or the bayou. We can't see much, but enough. Looks like a younger woman. Long, dark hair. Wearing a dress. She's just draped there. I approach the edge and shine my light down. The beam pierces the fog and the darkness, hitting the surface of the black water. Du Bois is right. There's a shape snagged on the rusted iron grill where the canal water feeds into the pump works. It is unmistakably human. The water level seems unnaturally high tonight, nearly kissing the concrete apron. Du Bois whispers, "She's been in the water for a while, Sarge. But there's something about the air here. It smells clean, almost. Like fresh rain, not marsh gas. That's wrong. Every body pulled from this water smells like rot, iron, and deep earth. The absence of the expected putrefaction is a sign, a supernatural marker that this body hasn't followed the natural rules of decay." I shine my light onto the concrete itself. The area is clean, no mud tracks, no footprints other than ours. Have you logged anything yet, Du Bois? Taken photographs of the immediate vicinity. Du Bois shakes his head quickly. Negative, Sarge. I remembered the rule. The one about the coordinates. I just radioed 17th Street Canal vicinity and waited for you. Good. Rule 0 observed. We haven't given the water a clear map yet. All right. We need the recovery team, but they're hours out. We need to secure the body now. The tide and the pumps could dislodge her. We'll do the minimum required for identification before they arrive. I look at the water, which seems to shimmer faintly, reflecting the flickering yellow sodium lamp. I think some crimes were never meant to be solved, and certainly, some locations were never meant to be cataloged. The pumping station is a site of constant battle against nature, and tonight, nature seems to be winning. The water levels are high, the lights are failing, and the air smells like a grave that was recently washed clean. We retrieve the rope and grappling hooks from the trunk. The routine procedural element, the act of recovering a deceased person, is the anchor that keeps my fear contained. It's a job. I focus on the tensile strength of the rope, the angle of the hook. As I swing the grappling hook over the black water, aiming for the metal grating just above where the body is draped, I feel a strange pressure. It feels like the entire canal has inhaled, and I am standing on its chest. Then, the static in my earphone flares violently, a high-pitched scream of white noise, followed by a sudden, sharp drop in the ambient temperature around us. Du Bois jumps back. Did you hear that, Sarge? The air just got cold. I heard it. I confirm, my voice rough. The noise on the radio was too distinct, too localized to the water. It wasn't simple interference. It was a complaint. The light fixture overhead gives a final, aggressive pop and dies, plunging us into absolute darkness, illuminated only by my small handheld flashlight beam cutting through the dense fog. We are truly alone with the canal now. The immediate darkness forces a moment of frozen adrenaline. I rely purely on the beam of my flashlight, which seems weaker now, somehow absorbed by the dense atmosphere. Du Bois breathes hard behind me. It's the grid, Sarge. Power failure, maybe. No, I say, focusing the light back on the water. Look, the surface of the black canal is now glowing faintly, reflecting the distant, obscured city lights, but not with the smooth reflection of still water. It's a subtle, disturbed phosphorescence, like something massive is moving just beneath the surface, stirring up the deep silt. The body is still snagged on the intake grate. We proceed with the recovery. The procedure is crude and necessary. We manage to secure a line around her middle using the hook and slowly, straining against the water's inertia and the oppressive weight of the body, we pull her up onto the concrete apron. She lands with a sickening, wet slap. The water immediately rushes back into the canal, leaving behind a slick of black residue on the concrete. The woman is young, maybe mid-20s, dressed in a tattered, once elegant gown that is now heavy with mud and water. Her skin is pale, almost translucent, but not bloated as a typical floater would be. And then I register the violation of Rule 2. I kneel beside the body, placing a gloved hand on her forearm to check for rigor. Her skin is not just cold. It should be icily, profoundly cold, reflecting the temperature of the water she lay in. Instead, she is impossibly warm. Not body temperature, not feverish, but the deep, internal warmth of a furnace banked for the night. It feels like she's just been pulled from a hot spring, even though she was submerged in the murky, cold canal for what must have been days. Du Bois. I hiss, my gaze fixed on her face, which is strangely intact, almost serene. She's warm. Get the blanket and the medical pack. Let's process the identification items quickly. The warmth radiating from her is what we dread. It means the water hasn't finished with her. It means the entity that claimed her is still investing energy in keeping her here, available, movable. The water is holding her breath for her. My flashlight beam travels down her arm, checking her personal effects. Wet clothing, sodden hair, and then I see it. A delicate gold watch on her wrist. A vintage piece, slightly submerged in the black muck clinging to her hand. I gently clear the grime away from the face of the watch. Rule 1. The watch must never stop ticking. The timepiece is essential. It's a ward. Time is structure, and the water is chaos. If the body is still connected to chronological time, it is still bound by the laws of our reality. The watch is beautiful, but its glass is cracked, spiders webbing across the face. The hands are completely stopped, frozen at precisely 2:22. A profound shiver runs through me. It is 2:25 now. The watch stopped just 3 minutes ago, the moment the light popped and the air turned violently cold. The moment the water realized we were taking her. The weight of the evidence is crushing. Not only is she impossibly warm, but her tie to the present moment has been severed. I think some crimes were never meant to be solved, and sometimes the evidence itself becomes the source of the danger. This watch isn't just a possession. It's the broken seal on an ancient agreement. Du Bois, get the evidence bags. We are taking the watch and the dress with us. Do not take your eyes off the body. As I carefully remove the gold band from her wrist, I note the faint scar tissue beneath it. It looks like she had worn this watch constantly for many years. As I lift it away, I feel an enormous pressure shift in the atmosphere, like a massive door has just swung open somewhere in the dark. The woman's hand, freed from the watch, slowly, infinitesimally, clenches. Her fingers curl inward, not in a spasm of rigor mortis, but with intent. I freeze, my breath caught in my throat. I stare at her face. Her eyes are still closed, but the expression is no longer serene. It is focused, strained. Sarge, Du Bois asks, his voice trembling as he holds the evidence bag open. We need to move her now. I whisper, bagging the watch. It feels heavier than gold, weighty with displaced time. Do not log the time 2:22 on any report. We'll use the moment she was secured to the stretcher back at the station. We secure the woman onto a rigid backboard. Lifting her is arduous. Despite her slender frame, she possesses a density that defies physics. It's the weight of the water itself, the Mississippi's specific gravity, still bound to her flesh. The warmth emanating from her is palpable against the cold night air. We struggle to lift her into the back of my SUV. We couldn't wait for the medical examiner's van. As we buckle her in, the persistent radio static suddenly spikes, coalescing into a brief, muffled sound that is unequivocally a gurgling laugh. It stops instantly, leaving only the hiss. We broke Rule 1. The clock stopped. And now, she knows where she is going. The drive back to the 8th District Precinct is the slowest 15 minutes of my career. Du Bois is riding shotgun, eyes fixed straight ahead, clutching the bag containing the gold watch like a holy relic. The smell of wet earth and something faintly floral, her perfume, now activated by the unnatural warmth, is overwhelming the AC. We're driving through the city's veins, but the city seems distant, muffled by the fog and the growing certainty that we are transporting a package the laws of nature and man have no jurisdiction over. We get her into the precinct's secure evidence locker. The locker is a refrigerated room in the basement, designed to keep evidence stable. We log the body as Jane Doe, 10-54, pumping station vicinity. We deliberately list the time of discovery as 2:45, a good 20 minutes past the moment the watch stopped, and the location as 4 blocks inland from the canal. Rule 0 and Rule 1 breaches are covered administratively. I send Du Bois back to his patrol, instructing him to file the standard preliminary report and to include absolutely no mention of the body's temperature or the stopped watch. The less documentation, the less the entity can track. I head upstairs to the administrative terminal to formally open the case file, the 10-54 folder. This is where the paper terror begins. I call up the digitized report. The screen flickers, displaying the standard NOPD template. I begin typing. Description of deceased, circumstances of recovery, evidence collected. I reference the gold watch. Item 401. A. Gold wristwatch. Patek Philippe. Face cracked. Hands stopped. I pause, looking at the time I logged, 2:45. As I type the word stopped, the cursor blinks aggressively. A small, almost imperceptible surge runs through the keyboard. I type the word again. Item 401. A. Gold wristwatch. Patek Philippe. Face cracked. Hands running. I blink. I delete running and retype stopped. Item 401. A. Gold wristwatch. Patek Philippe. Face cracked. Hands running. The system is fighting me. Or rather, the documentation itself is rejecting my input. The paper trail is cleaning itself. I think some crimes were never meant to be solved, and some files were never meant to be finalized. This file is resisting the truth. I pull up the geolocation entry I manually manipulated, moving the recovery point 4 blocks inland. The digital map flashes, then shifts on its own. The pin moves back, closer to the water, closer to the pumping station. I move it back inland. It fights me. The pin vibrates on the screen. It is trying to lock onto the precise, forbidden coordinates. This is the ultimate fear of Rule 0, the physical reality of the documentation attracting the entity back to the point of administrative possession. I decide to print the working report now, before the digital file can fully corrupt itself. I hit print. The laser printer whirs, struggling, then spits out the 3 pages. Page 1. Case summary. Location, 17 Street Canal. Time of death, unknown. Time of recovery, 2:45. All is relatively clean. Page 2. Deceased description. Gender, estimated age, clothing. Page 3. Evidence collected. I look down at my entry for the watch. Item 401. A. Gold wristwatch. Patek Philippe. Face cracked. Hand stopped at 2:22. But beneath that entry, a new line has appeared, printed in a faint, watery blue ink, a color the laser printer shouldn't be capable of producing. Item 401. B. Water. No description of what water means. Just the single, italicized word. And the location on the printed map on page 1 has now shifted, ink visibly spreading and darkening, pulling the marker straight back to the mouth of the canal. Panic, cold and sharp, cuts through the fear. The file isn't just correcting itself, it's adding information. It's declaring a new piece of evidence, one that can only exist if the body is still connected to the source. I grab the printed pages. I need to check the source. I need to check the body. I descend into the precinct basement. The air down here is usually musty and cool, but as I approach the evidence locker, the air becomes intensely cold, frigid, the kind of dry cold that stings the lungs. The cold of the precinct fighting the warmth of the drowned. I key in the access code to the refrigerated locker. The door hisses open. The light inside is fluorescent white, harsh against the sterile steel shelves. The woman is on the backboard, draped in a white sheet. She is still. I peel back the sheet just enough to touch her skin. Rule 2 confirmation. Despite the below-freezing temperature of the locker, her forearm is still radiating that impossible, deep heat. It feels like she's lying on a hidden heating pad. Then I notice the wetness. The steel table beneath the backboard is perfectly dry, except for a large, spreading wet patch directly beneath where her midsection rests. It is canal water, black, thick, smelling faintly of the marsh, but it shouldn't be here. We towel-dried her before placing her. She shouldn't be actively leaking the water that killed her. But the most disturbing evidence is not the water. It's the sound. The faint, rhythmic drip, drip, drip coming from somewhere inside the locker. I shine my light around. It's not a leaky pipe. It's coming from the ceiling, directly above the deceased. But the ceiling is dry. I look back at the backboard. The water is actively seeping from her, accumulating on the stainless steel, and simultaneously, it is being drawn up, defying gravity, clinging to the underside of the ceiling above her, condensing and falling again in a relentless, slow cycle. She is generating her own local water cycle. She is the water now, and she is trying to escape. The dripping sound intensifies, a steady, hypnotic rhythm that seems to be counting down to something. I stand paralyzed in the freezing evidence locker, watching the dark water defy physics, drawn both down by gravity and up by some perverse internal pull generated by the woman on the steel table. The entire room is a battleground between structure, the refrigerated locker, and chaos, the drowned. I slam the locker door shut, locking the heat and the water cycle inside. I lean against the cold metal, trying to regain my breath, the scent of the swamp still heavy on my gloves. The file added water as evidence. The body is generating water. It wants to go home. And the rules we broke, Rule 0, documentation, and Rule 1, the stopped clock, have empowered it. The basement of the 8th District Precinct is a labyrinth of storage rooms and maintenance tunnels. It's usually dry, dusty, and full of forgotten artifacts of old cases. As I walk quickly toward the main stairs, I notice the first trail. A faint, meandering track of dark water staining the concrete floor. It leads away from the evidence locker, not toward the stairs, but deeper into the storage maze, toward the neglected far corner where the old boiler room and the access hatch to the storm drains are located. But the body is locked inside the refrigeration unit. I check the door handle. Secure. I shine my flashlight down the trail of water. The puddles are small, not large enough to indicate that someone was dragged. They look exactly like water that has been slowly expelled, step by step, by a foot that is still sodden and cold. They are footprints. The trail of impossible water leads me into the deep recesses of the basement. The storage rooms are dark, filled with rusting desks and stacks of sealed, decades-old investigation boxes. The air here should be stagnant, but it's moving, generating a faint, persistent draft that carries the smell of salt and decay. I draw my service weapon, the familiar weight a slight comfort, though I know lead is useless against water and memory. I follow the trail, my boots crunching on the dry dust between the wet prints. The prints are clearly visible, a woman's small, bare foot. She's walking. I think some crimes were never meant to be solved because the victims never accepted their status as victims. As I round a corner, I hear it, a faint, dragging sound, the sound of wet fabric scraping on concrete, moving ahead of me. My heart hammers against my ribs. The drowned woman is not just warm, she's mobile. The stopwatch didn't just break the seal on her permanence in our reality. It allowed her to begin walking again, to reverse the process of being secured. The water is calling her back, and she is answering. I move faster, flashlight beam dancing wildly. The basement opens into the massive, echoing space of the old boiler room, where the enormous, unused machinery stands like silent iron titans. I see her, not the body I locked up, but a dark, vaguely human shape disappearing behind the massive, cylindrical boiler. She is moving slowly, deliberately, leaving a glistening, continuous trail of the black canal water. She is wearing the tattered dress. Her long dark hair is plastered to her back. Police. Stop right there. My voice sounds pathetic, thin against the vast, echoing silence of the boiler room. The figure doesn't stop. It doesn't even pause. I raise my gun, but hesitate. What am I shooting? A ghost? A shell animated by water? The bureaucratic nightmare of shooting a reanimated corpse is almost worse than the horror itself. I focus on the process. Follow the evidence. Secure the scene. I run into the boiler room. The temperature spikes aggressively here, the heat of the old building structure holding against the cold she carries. The conflict between the heat and the moisture creates a rising steam that fills the air, thick and obscuring. I think about the rules again. If she escapes, the documentation we logged, even the falsified documents, will become unstable. Jenkins' case proved that. The river will reclaim the files. I reach the boiler. The figure is gone, but the trail continues. It leads directly to a heavy, circular maintenance hatch set into the concrete floor. The direct access point to the city's storm drain system, which feeds directly into the Mississippi River. The hatch is massive, secured by 4 heavy iron bolts. 3 of the bolts are rusted shut, but the 4th, the one closest to the water trail, is slowly, agonizingly turning. The metal squeaks against the housing, a sound of immense friction and effort. I rush forward, dropping to my knees. The wet prints stop at the hatch. I see the body, or the reanimated shell of the body, hunched over the hatch, her back to me. The back of her gown is soaked, clinging to her impossibly warm skin. She has one hand wrapped around the iron bolt handle, slowly twisting. The effort is tremendous. The water is helping, lubricating the rust. Her head moves. She looks over her shoulder, not with her eyes, but with a slow, deliberate tilt of the neck. She is still Jane Doe, but her face is no longer serene. Her expression is one of single-minded focus, the jaw slightly dropped, expelling a silent, slow bubble of dark water down her cheek. I raise my gun again, pointing it at the center of her back. Stop turning the bolt, I command, my voice shaking despite my effort to keep it steady. The drain is restricted. You can't go out this way. A sound finally emerges from her, a low, resonant grinding, the sound of deep-sea pressure against bone, and it seems to come from the water puddles around her feet, not her throat. She pulls her focus back to the bolt, twisting it one more, agonizing turn. The bolt shrieks, nearly free. She is moments away from lifting the hatch and dropping herself into the arterial system of the city, back toward the main river. If she escapes this way, the contamination will be widespread. The water will have won the territory battle. I make a decision based purely on paperwork and containment. I cannot let her escape and invalidate every documented crime in the system. I fire a single, warning shot into the concrete wall beside her head. The gunshot is deafening in the confined space. The drowned woman stops. She doesn't flinch. She simply pauses the rotation of the bolt. The radio static suddenly explodes in my ear, a roaring, deep sound, and through it, I hear a voice that sounds like 1,000 gallons of water being poured into a funnel, a deep, feminine drone that vibrates in my chest. My name is not water. The voice, the resonant, echoing drone that vibrated through the metal of the boiler room and the fillings in my teeth, was the most absolute sound I had ever heard. It wasn't the voice of the woman. It was the voice of the Delta, speaking through its property. My name is not water. The drowned woman remained hunched over the hatch, her focus still on the iron bolt, but she was listening to me now. The water cycle she was generating stopped instantly. The steam faded. The intense cold began to dissipate, leaving behind only the heavy, swampy warmth she carried. I lower my weapon slightly, the tactical necessity giving way to the sheer, terrifying intimacy of the conversation. Then tell me your name, I say, my voice raw. We need a name for the report. You need to be identified. I am pleading with an elemental force, using bureaucracy as my shield. She slowly rises from the hatch, turning to face me fully. Her eyes are open now, opaque and black, like deep water under moonlight. The dress clings to her, dripping a steady stream of black fluid onto the floor. If I give you my name, you log my ownership, the heavy voice replies, still coming from all around me. If you log my ownership, you give them the map to find me again. The rules are ancient, officer. Rule 0 protects me from your world and me from theirs. She moves toward me, one slow, heavy step at a time, leaving 2 perfect, wet footprints on the dusty concrete. The watch, I say, trying to anchor her to my reality. It stopped. 2:22, why did it stop? The watch keeps the soul tethered to time. When the body returns to the source, the soul is free to follow the current. The watchman keeps the gate, she states, pointing a finger, white, wrinkled, but impossibly warm, at the gold watch I placed in the evidence bag. When you removed the watchman, the time ran out. The clock stopped. I woke up. I think some crimes were never meant to be solved because the solution itself is the disaster. The rules exist not to protect the truth, but to protect the stability of the veil between the known and the eternally wet. You are a 10 to 54. You are evidence. We have to file the report. I insist, gripping the paperwork crumpled in my hand. I need your identity to close the file. She stops 10 feet away from me. The warmth radiating off her is stifling, suffocating. It smells like life, but compressed by pressure. The file is already written, she says, her voice lowering, becoming concentrated, focusing into a single, sorrowful alto that feels like a whisper in my ear. You logged me as Jane Doe. That is enough. Release the file. Let me go. She is asking for a deliberate cover-up, a final adherence to the spirit of Rule Zero. Protect the deceased by obscuring the truth of their death and identity from both man and the water's rivals. If I comply, the file will remain stable, untainted, but the truth will be lost forever. If I press for her identity, the file will be corrupted, and the entire administrative system of the 8th District will be saturated and compromised, just like Jenkins' case. I look at the paperwork. The digital version is fighting me, correcting itself to reveal the forbidden coordinates. The paper version already has water listed as evidence. The clock is stopped. The body is warm. The water is demanding control. I need to make the final choice about documentation. I pull out the gold watch from the evidence bag in my pocket. The glass is cracked, the hands frozen at 2:22. If I give you your name on the file, I say, focusing on the small, impossible warmth of the watch, will you return to the evidence locker and stay put? She shakes her head slowly, the heavy, wet hair shifting with the movement. I belong to the current. I belong to the delta. I cannot be contained, only acknowledged. This is the ultimate revelation. The purpose of the rules isn't containment. It's acknowledgement of failure. We, the living, must formally admit that some things are beyond our jurisdiction. I make my decision. I am a cop before I am a priest, but I am a resident of New Orleans before I am a cop. I understand the rules of the bayou better than the rules of the bench. I take the crumpled report pages, the ones that listed the forbidden coordinates and the item water. I hold them out to her. I will not log your name, I say, but I will not destroy this evidence either. I tear the paper into 4 pieces, careful not to destroy the text, simply dividing the bureaucratic whole. I drop the pieces onto the wet concrete at her feet. She looks down at the scraps of paper. Then she looks up at me. A smile, slow and cold, creases her face. Thank you, watchman. She turns, moving back toward the maintenance hatch. She places her hands on the iron surface, but she does not touch the bolts. Instead, the dark, stagnant water around her feet suddenly begins to swirl, drawing the scraps of paper down. The water rises like steam, but thick and black, enveloping the base of the hatch. The heavy iron lid slowly, silently, lifts itself a few inches, floating on the cushion of rising water pressure. The drowned woman gives me one last look, a look of profound, silent relief. She steps into the darkness of the drain system. The rising water swallows her legs, then her torso, then her face, until she is only a ripple in the black fluid. The hatch falls back into place with a deafening, final clang that echoes the sound of the entire precinct snapping back into normal reality. The warmth vanishes instantly. The cold returns, the normal, musty basement cold. The dark, wet footprints on the concrete begin to evaporate, drying too fast for physics. When I check the maintenance bolts, they are rusted, untouched, fused firmly shut. The boiler room is silent, empty, and dry. I walk back to the evidence locker. I open the door. The steel table is clean. The sheet is lying folded, empty, on the surface. The only evidence left is the heavy scent of ozone, a lingering dampness, and the gold watch in my pocket, the hand still frozen at 2:22. I put the watch on her file, listed simply as Item 401, a gold watch. Hand stopped. I file the rest of the report under Jane Doe, accidental drowning, body washed out to sea. I keep my word. The case file is clean. The city is safe, for now. The clock on the dash now reads 4:37. I am sitting back in the squad car, parked exactly where I started, on Esplanade. The dense fog has pulled back, retreating to the bayou and leaving the street wet but clear, reflecting the returning, sharp neon of the quarter. The heavy silence that follows the kind of terror I just experienced is almost worse than the terror itself. It's the silence of successful deception, the silence of the administrative ledger being clean, despite the screaming truth. My uniform is damp, clinging uncomfortably to my skin, carrying that residual, faintly floral scent that isn't supposed to exist alongside marsh gas. I carefully wipe the last remnants of mud and concrete dust from my boots. The paperwork sits neatly on the passenger seat, the officially filed, sanitized version. Jane Doe. Accidental. Case closed. The static on the radio is back to its normal, low, unintelligible hum, the usual chatter of a city that thinks it's asleep. But the sound is different to me now. It's not just interference. It's a living membrane, separating us from the deep, vast library of water that wraps around the city. I pull the gold watch from my pocket one last time. It's cold now, utterly enameled.